most scholars believe that Narmer was the first king of unified Egypt. Among the many reasons for this belief is that he is the first king to appear in murals, wearing both the white and red crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt, symbolizing his authority and legitimacy over both parts of the country. This established a line of kings, believed to be his descendants, who unified and ruled a kingdom that stretched from the Mediterranean Sea in the north to the Nubian deserts, in what is known today as Sudan. These kings, numbering 7, formed the first dynasty. Constantly challenge what scholars thought they knew about Egypt's oldest recorded history. This often leads to revisions of the ruling dates of various dynasties and their kings. It has been very difficult for Egyptologists from all periods and institutions to determine an accurate timeline for the first dynasty's period of influence in Egypt. Among several different dates proposed by scholars, the most famous is the period between approximately 3,500 and 2,800 BC. There are strong arguments for placing it either a century or two earlier, or perhaps a little later. What is certain is that Narmer was succeeded by a king whose primary name was Horaha, meaning Horus the fighter, or simply Aha the fighter. It is also believed that Narmer was married to a woman named Neith-hotep, whose final burial place was identified in the burnt remains of a massive tomb in Nakada by archaeologist Jacques de Morgan, whose team discovered the tomb in 1896. Its size was about 60 meters by 30 meters. Due to the massive size of this early Egyptian tomb, it was initially believed to be the final resting place of King Menes, the first king of unified Egypt. However, due to the many signs and seals bearing Aha's name discovered inside the tomb, it is understood that its occupant died during his lifetime, or perhaps he oversaw the woman's burial. Although some believe she might have been his wife, the scholarly consensus is that Neith-hotep was Aha's mother. It is also certain that kingship in ancient Egypt, even at such an early period, was usually passed from father to son, and thus Aha must have been the son of Narmer and Neith-hotep. The fact that she was buried in Nakada and not in Abydos suggests that the artifacts bearing Aha's name, such as seals and pottery, have not yet been discovered in the Nile Valley. Therefore, to maintain power in Lower Egypt, the government had to move from the royal family's strongholds in Thinis, Abydos, and Hierakonpolis to a more central location like Memphis. Although Memphis in Aha's time might have been little more than a white-walled fortress, it would remain one of the greatest cities of ancient Egypt and the rest of the ancient world throughout history. Like the rest of the kings of his dynasty, Aha had 2 tombs, one in the royal cemetery in Abydos and the other at the Saqqara site outside Memphis. The tomb in Abydos was the king's actual burial place, while the tomb at Saqqara was merely a memorial tomb, a ceremonial tomb that did not contain the actual body. Scholars still debate the reason for building such tombs, but archaeologists agree that Aha and the rest of the first dynasty kings were all buried in the royal cemetery in Abydos, while their memorial tombs were built at the Saqqara site. Aha's tomb site in Abydos was close to the tomb of a lady named Benerib, a name that literally means sweetheart, and Benerib may have been Aha's wife, as her name also appeared in Naqada, at the site of his mother Queen Nighthotep's large tomb. However, Benerib was not the mother of Aha's heir, but rather his son from another wife named Kent, and his name was Jer. The name Jer means Horus the Nourisher. According to Manetho, Jer ruled for 57 years and was also a physician. Another record, known as the Palermo Stone, believed to have been compiled in the 25th century BC, also indicated a long reign, but most of the Palermo Stone, which deals with Jer's reign, has been damaged, making it difficult to obtain details of his reign. However, one section mentioned his campaign to an unspecified land, perhaps in Sinai or southern Canaan at that time. There seems to have been at least an official visit to the cities of Buto and Sais in the Delta region, where they were the sites of important temples and shrines. Although little may be known about the details of Jer's life, nothing is known about his death, or rather about an event directly after his death, as nearly 300 subsidiary burials, as archaeologists call them, have been discovered around Jer's tomb in Abydos. Most of these burials seem to have been of palace servants, many of whom were women, and a few may even have been members of the royal family. The prevailing belief was that these individuals would join the king and serve him in the afterlife, as they did in their lives on earth, and all of them seem to have died or been killed either by strangulation or poison shortly after their master's death. By the time of the Third Dynasty in Egypt, the practice of subsidiary burials had largely ceased. However, these practices were still part of the funerary rituals of the later First Dynasty kings. After Jer's death, he was succeeded by Jet. This is the most common name used by modern scholars. But you sometimes hear other names such as Zet and Waj. Jet is an enigmatic figure because findings suggest that his reign was short compared to his predecessors. Since Den was not old enough at Jet's death to assume his duties as king, his mother, Queen Meritneith, took over the regency until her son reached the appropriate age. Many seals bearing Den's name were discovered in Meritneith's massive tomb in Abydos, leading Egyptologists to conclude that she was a woman of high standing, possibly Den's mother. This was later confirmed when seals bearing the phrase "King's Mother Meritneith" were found in her tomb. Compared to his predecessors, much is known about Den and his reign, not only because more artifacts bearing his name have been discovered in greater numbers, but also because of the record known as the Palermo Stone, which we mentioned earlier, which gives us some specific events from his reign, which was relatively long. Having ascended the throne as a child, according to some scholars, Den may have officially ruled for 50 years. Among the events mentioned by the Palermo Stone were hippopotamus hunting, and another was conducting a national census, perhaps the first in all of history. Scholars speculate about the brevity of his rule, but it seems to have ended when his heir, Crown Prince Den, was still a child. For this reason, there are no approximate details about his life or major events during his reign. Like his predecessors, Jet also had 2 tombs, one in Abydos, where his actual body was buried, and another memorial one in Saqqara, both of which were surrounded by a number of subsidiary burials. As mentioned earlier, Den's father and predecessor, Jet, did not rule for long. The results of this census may have been the impetus for governmental reform, or at least the expansion of the Egyptian government, as evidenced by the creation of new positions such as the Chancellor of Lower Egypt, as well as the growth of burials in the elite cemetery of government officials near Saqqara, some of which in the first dynasty surpass the tombs of later pharaohs. Den's reign was most famous for armed conflicts with Egypt's neighbors, especially the Canaanites. An ivory label discovered in Abydos depicts Den and some hieroglyphic symbols that translate to the first strike. In this unique label, Den is shown raising his mace with one hand and striking a person who appears to be a foreign leader. A similar scene appears in the 14th year on the Palermo stone. During these campaigns, it was mentioned that Den brought many foreign women to fill the royal harem. Architecture in Den's reign was highly innovative, and what remains of it today comes from burial sites. In Den's tomb in Abydos, we saw for the first time an entrance leading to the burial chamber, a feature copied by later pharaohs as well as ordinary individuals for their final burial sites. Den was succeeded by a king named Anegib. Compared to his predecessors, little is known about this king, as his name has been found in only 3 places within Egypt to date. Although he may have ruled for a long time, there is evidence that the central government's control over its territories had significantly weakened, and there may have been conflicts within the royal family. For example, Anegib's name on king lists and on many stone vessels seems to have been erased contemptuously during the reign of his successor, Semerkhet. Anegib's tomb in Abydos was the smallest and least well-made of all the royal tombs, which may indicate a lack of power and influence during his reign. Unlike other kings of the first dynasty, there was no tomb or any memorial for Semerkhet in Saqqara. The last king of the first dynasty, Qa'a, ruled for nearly 3 decades, but again, the details of what happened during that period are very obscure. As with other kings of his dynasty, many clues come from what was left in the tombs after they were looted by thieves. Seals and jars discovered in Shaw's tomb in Abydos showed that trade with the Levant continued, and the subsidiary burials around it showed that the practices were still alive in the 29th century BC. As for why and how the first dynasty ended after Qa'a, it is a real mystery. One theory is that it may have been replaced. This explanation is based on 2 names, Ba and Snefirka, both of which were found on a few pieces of pottery, where Qa'a's name seems to have been erased or modified to include them. The theory assumes that these individuals may have usurped the throne for a period, but however long their reign, later rulers did not consider them legitimate, and this is why they did not appear in any king list. The king who ruled Egypt after Anegib was Semerkhet. According to the Palermo stone, this king ruled for approximately 9 years. Many believe that Semerkhet may have been a usurper to the throne because the name of his predecessor, Anajib, was erased from several stone vessels discovered in his tomb. And another piece of evidence supporting this is that his name seems to have been deliberately removed from the Saqqara king lists, which were found on the walls of a senior official's tomb during the reign of Pharaoh Ramses II. This may indicate that future generations did not consider him a legitimate ruler, or perhaps they simply forgot him, which is unlikely because the ancient Egyptians were known for keeping accurate records. However, Semerkhet's tomb in Abydos was superior in size and quality to other royal tombs. Interestingly, unlike other tombs from the first dynasty, no memorial tomb for Semerkhet has been discovered yet in the royal necropolis of Saqqara, and this may be why he does not appear in the Saqqara king list. The other explanation is that there was a peaceful transition from the first to the second dynasty, and this may have happened where Qua had no sons to inherit the throne, and perhaps the kingship passed to another related house, or even a separate house, without major disturbances or violence. We may never know what happened. What is clear is that the Egyptian state crystallized with the kings of the first dynasty and helped lay the foundations for a civilization that would last for thousands of years. Share with us in the comments what you think of this episode. And if you like our content, support us by subscribing. You can watch other videos from our channel that address other topics about history and culture.